Not having success is not an option. Like I have to succeed. It's basically a matter of existence, survival of my family. When you want to change a certain habit, science says it takes at least 21 days. Right? For the brain to start growing. You know, new neurons that are reprogramming. But if you don't have the right environment, that's going to be very, very challenging. The environment is the one that can be very stimulative to you. It can be really supportive or it can be pulling you down. So it's super important, even though we always encourage ourselves to be independent in terms of what we do, what we eat, how we sleep, how we lead our lives and what we do and how we can live the best version of our lives possible, but at the same time, we are social beings. We are very tribal beings. And even if it's the smallest community, we still want to belong to that community. We still want this community to support us, even if it's one person, two. But it's super important in the end of the day because, making tough choices, these are tough choices. 'Cause society, when you go out there, super majority of the places where you go to eat or people that you see, it's a kind of a vicious cycle and they lead their life in a certain way that maybe doesn't coincide or correspond to your choices that you want to make, the new choices. Or maybe the new changes. So it's really hard. I feel like it's reinventing yourself constantly, for me. I've had this kind of upbringing, had a great foundation. And, I have achieved incredible things. I was dreaming of becoming number one in the world and becoming a Wimbledon champion. And that was my dream. I achieved that dream within 2 days. I won Wimbledon and at the same day became number one in the world. It's just, once in a lifetime type of experience. And when you do something for the first time, obviously that big, it's just like you're flying to the moon. I mean, you're not you, it's a kind of an old out-of-body experience. So, of course, it was kind of a surreal experience for me and I tried to enjoy it and embrace it, but at the same time, I felt like, okay, it's great to share the court with these guys, but I want to beat them. I want to get the biggest titles. I want to be number one. I want to dominate. So, I think that the first kind of that wave that I was riding on helped me to win my first slam. When I was 19. I won couple of big tournaments and so forth. I reached number 2 in the world. But, I still wasn't number 1. And then I had a 3-year period I didn't win a slam. I was winning some big tournaments, but I couldn't win a slam. These two guys were beating me in every big match, Federer and Nadal. I changed rackets. Team members. I did everything I can to kind of find the right formula. And I was struggling physically as well. I wasn't, that's where actually I had my transformative journey. Nutrition-wise, where I took everything started going in the upwards direction for me and learning also from these guys, and the matches that we've played against each other was something that was extremely important for me at the time. I was, of course, trying to consume as much as I can this energy of the center court and everything. And it was overwhelming at times. But I was also very thorough in my analysis of the matches afterwards. Even though I don't necessarily like to watch matches that I lost, but you know, Kobe Bryant used to talk about this a lot, and I was talking to him personally about that, he would, and he said, even if it's just specific intervals of the match that you lost, that you want to watch, that you definitely look at that and you need to analyze that and you need to go through that cramping feeling. Because that's where you learn from those mistakes, and that's where you have an opportunity to rectify that the next tournament or next match and so forth. So, that helped a lot. I have identified that as well. Is my feeling of not being enough? And that goes back to my very beginning of my life and my relationship, particularly with my father. And not doing enough, not being good enough, etc., etc. So, and it's kind of the battle that I also go through often. 'Cause a lot of people, even closest people in my life, ask me, you know, what more do you want? You know, you have achieved everything. What do you want? Why do you keep going? And I tell them the good part that I told you, that I still really strongly feel it's inside of me, and I feel like as long as I have the capacity or ability to compete for the biggest titles in my sport, I want to keep going. And also partly the part that I didn't mention that inspires me to keep going is to test my limits mentally and physically. 'Cause when I was starting to break through in the professional tennis, I remember when you reach your 30, you start counting your days to your retirement. Like after 30, you know, that's it pretty much. It's also a kind of a curiosity from my side of how far can I go? You know, I'm 38 this year. You know, how long can I push my own limits? And I don't feel like I do have a limits. And I feel like the limits are normally constructs in our mind. I've seen the episode you did with Brian Johnson the other day. And then he talked about, you know, he's by a lot of people's opinion very extreme. But you know, he dedicated his own entire life to getting the data and understanding what are the best conditions for the longest living life that he can have for himself. Which I think it's something that is admirable, and you know, I give him huge credit for that. And I understand, because as a professional athlete, you know, the care for your body and your mind and the devotion to the daily habits is so tough. That's where it started, and I was like, I was really trying to adapt all of the great things that I could see. And I have a kind of a photogenic memory, and I'm a very visual person. And that was something that was kind of expected, that is kind of common as well, what you do with kids. You know, or with young athletes. Right? You watch videotapes, you try to analyze, try to talk. But you know, so it taught me to really understand that tennis is not only about hitting a tennis ball over the net and counting score and dreaming about these achievements and winning Wimbledon as our holy grail of tennis. But it's more than that. And I can use tennis as a platform to evolve into a better human being. At that point, I didn't understand that. But then as I was growing older and becoming more mature, I start to understand the importance of doing all of these practices. And I started to expand in each of these topics that I was going through with her. So, I'm very curious by nature. So, I was really always looking for new ways to improve myself and improve my life on this planet, you know? And I was very lucky to be basically have that space also from my parents. It's a kind of a self-discovery. Through the self-care, through tennis. Really consumed most of my life. But I'm still surprising and shocking myself on how much I actually need to still work on that, and I still, quote, don't know enough about that world. And it was really hard for me to accept that. You know, I thought, since 10, I basically started working on that and in growing the foundation, but it has evolved and has transformed so much. For me, in terms of how I see myself, how I see the world. And I thought, maybe when I was at the peak of my career. And, I felt like I'm unbeatable. And I feel like I could do anything. I kind of walking on the water. We all experience that in our own lives in certain way. And it's a great feeling. But then the ego takes you places where it's hard to come back from. And maybe you shouldn't come back from that. Maybe you're trying to find a balance, find the optimal measure that really works for you, but it took me time to really accept the fact that what I have learned, what I have mastered, and what I'm doing on a daily basis for the last 20 years or more is not necessarily a guarantee that I'll always find a way, and that will always work for me in this particular time of my life and circumstances that I'm facing. So that's a huge revelation for me, because and I'm still trying to get a grasp on it and understand all of these factors that are in play, that are challenging me on a daily basis. And when I talk from this perspective, it's a beautiful journey that I'm trying to embrace, but when you are immersed in the dark moment, it's kind of hard to really get out of that. But also, other athletes and how, the struggles they had mentally, and particularly the struggles that they had if they have not prepared themselves for that transition. I believe that in some way you cannot fully prepare yourself for that transition mentally. Like, it's going to be a sad day for me when I leave tennis. And it's going to be very emotional and all that. But what I'm talking about is basically the adrenaline that also needs to be filtered or rechanneled somewhere. And I know that I will play sports for the rest of my life because I love sports and being active is essential. But also, I feel like you need a challenge. Tennis has consumed most of my life, and that's what I know how to do best. But I have very broad interest in a lot of different things, and the industry, or the sphere of life, which is called health, wellness, and well-being, is my biggest passion, and it's very broad ecosystem or field, if you want, as because you're part of it. But it has been my passion for 15 plus years, and I'll always imagine the world where most of the people will take care of themselves, of, how they hydrate, how they eat, exercise, how they manage their sleep. Just a healthier world. And of course, it's harder. Change everything at the same time, and it of course takes a lot of different time, 'cause this planet is big. And there's a lot of people, but I taking small steps is very valuable, and it has its effect. And the idea is that you're always on a battlefield, and as you said, on the battlefield, you see the best of yourself and the worst of yourself. And often people said that to me when I moved to LA. Everyone's like, why do you want to be in LA? There's so much materialism, there's so much, illusion here. And I said, well, actually, I feel like I'm on the battlefield here. So, I see the best of myself and I see the worst of myself. And the worst of myself reminds me to keep going and to keep working on myself. And the best of myself allows me to share my message with the biggest megaphone in the world. And so, it's that dichotomy of actually, when you're looking for spiritual growth, you want to be in a place that reminds you of your weaknesses as much as your strength. Because if you are only reminded of your strength, you just have your ego. And if you were only reminded of your weaknesses, well, then you would be depressed or disheartened. But son, it's okay to be bored sometimes. First of all, you had a great active morning and you did a lot of things. Second of all, when you are bored, it doesn't mean that you have to instantly take a book or a screen or anything else. You need to also learn how to be with your thoughts. And if you are not comfortable being bored indoors, go outdoors. Sit on a chair and have some drink and just look at the sky. And I think that's much easier said than done. And I really would love my children to be able to be okay with being bored, because that's the time when you're actually most creative. Or that's the time when you can manage your thoughts and everything that you have been suppressing by distracting yourself with phone, with whatever it is. It's a struggle, but it's important. I think it's super important, particularly for them at this young age too. I think that it has been talked about a lot. Yeah, I agree. Why is it that our sports are so popular? Why is it that people relate to athletes? It's because of this grit, because of this battle. We all go through internal battle on daily basis, and in sports we can, of course, admire the features of an athlete, and the skills and the talent, and the abilities, but at the same time, we also identify ourselves with those athletes. We feel like, wow, that this game or a match, it's in a way a condensed daily life, or a condensed life into an hour or 2 or 3, where you start at the beginning. You're even, then you end up, winning or losing, but in the process, our journey of the match and the game, you're going through ups and downs. You're going, and particularly in individual sports, you're going. You mentioned Lewis Hamilton, another great legend. You're going through that battle of, trying to win that inner battle, where you go through your doubts, your worries, your fears. So, all of these elements are part of everyday life of everyday person. And that's why I feel like people relate to sports. And they also they when they go to see sport live, particularly. But also when they watch it on TV, I feel they're able because they are so connected to the community of that club or that athlete or whatever it is. They feel like all of their problems stop at least for those 2-3 hours that they are watching, where they feel like they can free themselves of the emotions and the burdens that are kind of wearing them down. But I can see that there's a lot of people that are like, that's why like after a game, they either feel drained or they feel energized. They either feel like they have kind of like collected that energy from the stadium, or they feel like they're completely like a deflated balloon.